Just when you thought CNN couldn't go any further with their insanity, they now compare the Trump campaign to 9/11. Let's get into it. Hey freethinkers, Chandler here, and yes, you heard me right. So I'm sure you heard that little intro bit and said, CNN compares Trump to 9/11. Wow, this doesn't surprise me. I want to know what this story is about. And let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, this story is something quite interesting, so grab your snacks, grab your drinks, have a comfortable seat, and let's just get right into this, because this story goes back a little bit. So it all starts after the election. So of course you guys know the election has been a whole big thing. We still don't know what has happened, though the mainstream media has called the election for Joe Biden. We know the truth. We know that Trump actually won the election, and we're fighting every cause we can to prevent the election being stolen, and there's Stop the Steal and all those different efforts. And those are all different videos and different subjects we can all get into, and we're still unsure of what's going to happen. It is still possible we could see a Biden presidency. It is still possible we could see another 4 years of Trump. Either way, that's a whole different subject. We're not going to talk about that right now, because that actually just kind of lays the groundwork for what the bigger story here is. Now, of course, I'm sure many of you guys have heard of Project Veritas. But if you guys don't know what Project Veritas is, let me just give you a quick rundown. Project Veritas is an independent journalist investigation sort of organization. They embed themselves and their agents within other organizations and possibly even government agencies like the United States Postal Service or companies like CNN, and they gather as much information they can to spread to the public as possible. And that is exactly what they did. Now, of course, I'm sure earlier this month you guys may have heard about them exposing the backdating happening in the USPS up in Pennsylvania. They had a whistleblower come forth and give a sworn affidavit and more information about all that. So I'm sure that was a big story before, but now we have another story. Now this story is big. It has to do with CNN. So Project Veritas has actually had somebody within CNN for, I think, I don't know the exact number, but I think it's either 1 or 2 months within CNN recording their high-level briefings, including the CEO, president of CNN, Jeff Zucker. He runs things over at CNN. He was, directly recorded through all this. And of course, I'm sure some of you may have known that this happened last year as well. They got some recordings of Jeff Zucker just going off on Trump and all that, being angry and just the normal thing. But now we're back at it, and the stakes could never be higher, because Jeff Zucker and CNN were talking about, you guessed it, the 2020 presidential election. Now, you would expect these tapes to be, a little bit dated. I mean, the election was a while ago, but they've continued to record. They've continued to record each and everything that happens in those calls, and so now we have a lot of information. And there's a few different things that were said in these calls, and these tapes are still being released. In fact, during today, which is it is December 1st, Project Veritas #ExposeCNN was trending. #CNN tapes was trending, because each and every person wanted to find out and know what was in these tapes, what's going on, and what's the whole story behind this. So what I'm going to do for you guys is we're going to play a full 2.5 minutes of the tapes that have dropped so far today, and then we're going to talk about some of the things that were in those tapes. So give these tapes a watch, and then we'll be right back to talk about it.
CNN says on Jeff Zucker's 9 a.m. editorial conference call how they, the Democratic Party, powerful interest groups, may determine how CNN will cover Trump not conceding the presidential election.
I just want to underscore something that Michael said earlier about the transition and Trump, because I've been talking to a lot of people this morning on both sides, and I just keep hearing the same thing, both from Republicans who have not come out to congratulate Biden, but also to those who have in the Democrats, and that is that we have to be, news organizations have to be very careful and very responsible about not giving Trump too much of a platform on his not conceding, because they feel the transition can go forward. And, other than the national security briefings, which are critical to start now, they just don't want us to exaggerate that Trump isn't leaving office. And I'm going to have a lot of specific reporting on that later today, but just big picture wanted to underscore what Michael had said.
Yep, agreed.
On the issue of why it's important to get the transition going right, the 9/11 report talks about one of the problems was that the trouble that was brewing got lost during the transition. So if you want a good concrete example of what happens when you don't have a good transition, go look at the Twin Towers.
Yeah. So I think that's an important point. I think it was discussed a little bit yesterday in terms of national security. I think it's really important to raise again. I would encourage folks to think about, that 9/11 Commission report and the lack of transition.
All right, so you just watched those tapes, and I'm sure that you need to pick your jaw up off the ground, or if you're not really new around here, you already know what CNN was up to. You already know what they kind of talk about, and you already know what they really mean by each and everything they said. So just to start it off, they directly spoke about how they worked with the Democratic Party, worked with what we would call the deep state, because that is what they do. They are colluding within the state to fight against the patriotic movement, to fight against Trump, and to fight against each and every one of what we stand for. And so CNN worked directly with this sort of cabal of people and spoke with them and said, well, what we're going to do is we're going to downplay the Trump refusing to concede, Trump refusing to give up, and Trump continuing to fight for this nation narrative, and focus more on the Biden transition narrative. And I think that's something that we've seen all throughout the media. Of course, not only has CNN, but the Associated Press, Fox News even, and plenty of these other news organizations have called the election for Biden, and they've gotten really deep and far into that, and now we're really seeing that it was all a concerted effort to reduce the morale as much as possible. You can look at it and see what they said on the tapes. It coincides directly with each and every one of those efforts to sort of reduce morale. And so them saying we're not going to really talk about Trump refusing to concede, but more so talk about the Biden transition, you can really see, and I'm sure plenty of you guys have heard as well, if you go to @transition46, which is the official government office of the president-elect account for Biden. I mean, he's already announcing his new cabinets, and of course there was actually an effort by Senator Chuck Schumer to get some of his cabinet nominations, if you can even call them that yet, confirmed before he is even inaugurated. And so we're 50 days out from when it's supposed to be his inauguration, but they already want to confirm some of his cabinet people that he hasn't even legally nominated yet to anything. So we're taking a look at all that, and we're really seeing that, man, maybe CNN and all these other organizations are getting directly involved in saying, no, yeah, Biden is our president, and we're not going to stand for Trump to refuse to concede. In our eyes, he's already left the Oval Office. So that's what we're seeing from that part of it. But then an even crazier part, and that's really what I'm going to be talking about, is that they are comparing the non-peaceful transition of power to 9/11. Now this is some dangerous rhetoric you look at here. Now not only did CNN try to go at James O'Keefe for saying, or publishing these tapes saying that violates their rights, and it's not true, of course, but CNN is obviously going after it and saying, but they're pushing all these dangerous narratives just like this one and saying that we're going to compare Trump refusing to concede, and we're going to compare the non-peaceful transition of power to being as bad as 9/11. 9/11, when nearly 3,000 Americans lost their lives in the attacks, and yet the non-peaceful transition of power in which 0 bullets have been fired and 0 people have been killed is as bad as 9/11. That's the really insane thing we're seeing here, and that's why at this rate you really can't call these news organizations any longer. These institutions that we've placed our trust and our attention to, like CNN, have proven to us once again that they are not worth a single ounce of respect that we give to them. And at this point, I think it's really clear to see that more and more of these tapes are going to come out, and more of this information of CNN being directly complicit and lying to the American people and trying to spread their narratives and lower the morale of the patriots that support the president. We're not going to stand by it anymore. We simply cannot. And that's why at this point we need to come out and say we're not gonna support you guys anymore. We need to look at Fox News and say, though you're not doing the stuff that CNN is doing, although I'm sure we're gonna get some information onto what Fox News is doing soon as well. Though you're not doing what they're doing, we're not gonna support you either, because these mainstream media organizations, or these lamestream organizations as the president so aptly calls them, they aren't worth our respect anymore. So we need to browse ourselves on the other organizations or other investigative, journalist organizations like Project Veritas, who are actually going to bring you the truth. And though they get attacked by CNN for it, we need to get out there and say, CNN, you can try to push push these legal ramifications against them, but we know that Project Veritas is something like 20-0 at this point. They've had so many lawsuits against them, and yet they've won each and every one of them. They have a whole wall of shame for retractions. They keep winning and winning and winning because they're actually out here reporting things. They're actually being journalists, and they're actually getting inside these organizations and saying enough is enough. We're going to report the truth, because if you won't, we will. And that's exactly what I I think we need to be supporting. So I'm going to keep you guys as updated as I can on more and more of these CNN tapes, because I'm sure this is only the beginning. If you guys would like to continue to support this channel, then please do so by subscribing, hitting that like button. If you'd like to support this channel financially, you can visit my donor box and support me through there, or you can join the memberships feature of this channel, in which you can support this channel monthly. But aside from all that, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll catch you next time, free thinkers. Don't forget to spread the virus of intelligence.